everyone. I'm going to welcome you and ask you to find seats if you can, those of you who are still coming in. I hope some of you were with us this morning, and we are thrilled to see the new faces come back this afternoon and join us as well. Just briefly, this event rose out of a gathering 15 years ago in Jacki Zehner's living room, in which we said we need to gather women together to support each other, to stand up, speak up, and show up for each other and bring women's voices and women's stories forward. This was Jacki's idea. We have to commemorate this somehow. We have to celebrate this beyond these opportunities to be together, which are such a gift in the middle of the festival to have this time together. So I want to recognize Jacki for having the vision to put this together. And I want to recognize Sharon. Stand up, Sharon. Who managed to design this with all of us in different parts of the world calling, saying, I need that narrative now. And honestly, choosing the 15 films for Jacki and the team was really hard to do. Liz and Maddie, thank you for your contributions to this in every single way. But this is yours now to take from here. And if we ever get to that point where we think, can't get this story told, it's just going to take, the barriers are too big, pick up this and imagine what a difference your talent, your story, your idea can make. So that's what it's really about. It's supposed to commemorate and celebrate, but it's also intended to inspire. And that's what all the afternoon is going to be about. So I'm going to invite Maddie up to introduce our first panel. And if you've been following it, that'll be followed by a conversation I'm going to have with the great Eve Ensler, and then another wonderful panel on what it takes to keep all this going, money, which will be moderated by the unbelievable Jacki Zehner. So Maddie, please.
Thank you so much, Pat. It's my pleasure to welcome you all. Thank you. On behalf of SheMoney, we're proud to be the hosts of the Women's Voices Forum and just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of our incredible sponsors, which you'll find in your magazine and also on our posters here that made this gathering and the magazine possible. And it's my pleasure to get right into this panel. It will be brief, but it will be followed by amazing discussion with the one and only V, formerly Eve Ensler, and Pat Mitchell, who you just heard from. So now I'd love to introduce our moderator to the front, Emily Ramshaw, the CEO of the 19th News. If you don't follow the 19th, I strongly encourage you to do that, joined by Jameka Autry and Bea Wangondu. Thank you so much. On the chair. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Is it on yet? Aha. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Emily Ramshaw. I'm the founder and CEO of the 19th, and I am thrilled to be here with two extraordinary documentary filmmakers. I was saying earlier, I've been the subject of a documentary and hope to never have that experience again. But the real hard work actually happens behind the camera, and so I am thrilled to be with these two, who I'm going to introduce for you now. First, to my immediate right is Bea Wangondu, who's the director and subject of Kikuyu Land, which is having its world premiere here at Sundance in the documentary competition. Right.
Thank you.
And Jameka Autry, a Sundance Fellow and producer of Time and Water, another truly powerful documentary about an Icelandic glacier lost to climate change. So welcome, Jameka.
Thank you.
These women are incredible. So Bea only has a quick 15 minutes, and so I'm going to, on the fly here, we're going to do sort of a hit Bea with a bunch of questions so we can get her part completed here and get her in her Uber. And then we're going to pivot to you, Jameka, to do a few more there. But so Bea, you are both a director and a subject of a film about colonial theft and generational dispossession. And I wonder sort of what did it cost you emotionally to turn the camera inward? You know, you're a journalist, but you're also the subject of this film.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Being introspective. Okay, so I was born in a family where my dad was a teacher. He always brought all these books that have pictures of the history of Greece, the history of Ethiopia, the history of this and that. But when it came to the history of Kenya, he did not, there were no books, there were no pictures. So I had all these questions. And he said, you need to go to your grandmother's house if you have questions like this about, how did we earn our independence in Kenya, blah, blah, blah. So as soon as I went to my grandmother's house, and this is my dad talking to me about the history of everywhere else, and my grandmother telling me about the culture and where we came from and who our ancestors were, and realizing that, coming back home and asking my dad, so how come Dr. Kraft, this white man from 19 whatever that was, discovered Mount Kenya, which is a mountain in Kenya, and not my grandmother who lived on this land for so long? And these are my kind of questions, but lateral questions. So the subject of this film is one of those questions where I asked, how come my grandfather had so much land? How come everybody around is so poor? And nobody would answer that question. And so it kept, and not only did they not answer, they dismissed me. You see, this is why you fail in your exams. You should just learn the curriculum that's made available and stop asking these silly questions. And I'm like, what do you mean? You can't on the one hand be this and on the other hand be this. So, and my whole life has become that. Don't go to war zones. That's where exactly I'm going. That's just how I became, because of being dismissed. And that's what formed the subject of the film.
Yeah, it's an incredible film. And I think, your film really exposes the intersection of sort of the patriarchy and the land. Even when women are the primary stewards of the land, as they are in your case, they're not the ones who have ownership or rights. How does gender shape in your story who has authority and sort of who bears the consequences?
Yes.
Yeah, talk a little bit sort of about the nexus of the film, the theme of the film.
Loss of land is an experience for every Kenyan. Colonialists coming in 1901, taking all the land from our ancestors and us never regaining our land back, and then new governments coming in and no reparations, at least nothing. Nobody has gotten their land back so far, 100 years later. And even then, with the loss of land, women and land ownership is something that's hardly happens, which is painful because we are the ones feeding our kids. We are the ones doing all the work. Yes, men are there, but this patriarchy that women can own land, what is that? So this film, part of my wanting to even be in front of the camera is challenging that notion, that historical, I'm censoring my words.
Bea's film is, when you watch it, and I can't wait for you to, it is kind of like a thriller. I mean, she is showing up as a journalist at these, tea farms and factories, effectively, that are run by Lipton and Unilever and company names that are incredibly prominent here. And she's effectively being threatened or saying, you don't want to have the camera on here. You don't know what's going to happen to you. I was often honestly scared for your life watching this film. And I'm curious, did being a woman ever grant you access, either to vulnerability or intimacy or serious risk of your life that would not have been possible otherwise? I mean, I'm curious how you think about the sort of give and take of the access it gave you to all these incredible women farmers, but also the risks that you and situations you were putting yourself in.
There was the advantage for me. There was that I'm female, actually. The men did not know, and we did not let them know that we were going into these spaces where all these women who are working in tea plantations are. Dress normal, look basic, like super basic. Don't attract any attention. Don't be, don't do your nails. Just be basic, so they don't think you're anybody. So I look just like them. So I'm dismissed just like them, and that way I have access. It was the only way.
I know your baseball cap in a lot of those scenes. It's something I thought about. And I'm curious to hear just a little bit, Bea. I know obviously filmmaking still reflects really sort of gendered power dynamics. Where did you feel those power dynamics most sharply in trying to get this film out the door?
That's a good question. Considering we had access already with the ladies, based off how I described earlier, the only challenge was to make sure that we are not caught. Because if they caught us, the women would lose their jobs. If they lose their jobs, what do we do? What do I do with 30 women who have each 3 4 kids living in these houses that they've been provided for by the tea plantations. That was the difficult part. But we just had to make sure that we are not caught. So it was a lot of sneaking around. Yeah, thankfully we had a great team. One of our producers grew up in tea plantations. He knew every last crack in the tea plantation. So that's how we managed to sneak around. But yeah, men, you see it in the film, telling the women you're useless, you're wasting your time, stop talking, take tea, meet your quota, you're wasting time, just words that are derogative. And we catch that on the film. Yeah, we just had to hide.
The other thing you captured that was just so powerful is these women, often older women who have worked on these tea farms their entire lives, who have been subject to endless rape at the hands of the men who they worked for. And they were so brave in telling those stories. And I wonder how you think about sort of the ethics and the privacy associated with some of these stories. Like, how do you ensure the safety of those women as you're telling their stories?
That's how.
Sorry, I know this is hard.
Yeah, that's okay.
If you want me to take a beat, I can, or move on. You let me know. Yeah. Yes. Let's take a beat. I mean, Jameka, so your film is also about something being sort of inherited, land being inherited, contested, and mourned. I'm curious, what does land mean to you personally, and why did you decide to produce a film about an Icelandic glacier as somebody has faced your own sort of climate challenges here at home?
Yeah, this was an interesting project for me. I usually work on a lot of social justice films, films about the African American experience, places where I feel comfortable sharing my story. And this was definitely not that. I, as a Black woman who's from the South, had no relationship to Iceland at all. And it brought up a lot of questions that I think we've been asking ourselves in the documentary community for a while about whose story is this to tell. And like, usually it's on the opposite foot, and this time I was like, am I the right person to tell this story? And the reason that I came aboard this project was because I just love Sarah Dosa so much. If you've ever met Sarah, she's amazing. She has a wonderful creative spirit, and I could not give up the opportunity to work with her. And later, while we were deep in the edit and, the place where you get stuck, and as a producer, you're trying to find like some inspiration to like keep the story going. I remember it was early summer and I was having this whole conversation with myself about how can I really be effective here? Because this is when, experience meets practice. And I don't have an experience in Iceland, but what happened was there was a tropical storm Chantal, which actually flooded my home. We lost our home in the middle of the night when a tropical depression came through. And, that moment, realizing, oh, the loss of land, the water that is inhabiting all of these nations, like this is interconnected. I don't have to be a resident of Iceland to know the impact and what this feels like. So at that point, I did use my own personal experience and personal pain to really lean into grief and loss and what happens when everything that you've known is taken away in a moment.
So powerful. Yep. B, we only have another minute with you, and I think I want to make sure that I ask, what do you hope that women who are watching this film, what do you hope that women and women of color filmmakers who are coming up behind you watching this film, what are the lessons that that you hope they learn from your experience and from this really powerful film?
I want us to be brave. I want us to be introspective. I want us not to people please. I want us to be real with ourselves. Like rise up for real. Like let's live this life fully. Like take your position. Be strong. Um, know your rights. Stand by them. Speak those good things to younger girls. Let's not do things because they're trendy. Let's be real. That's what I want women and girls to lean to. Yeah, I feel like I have nothing to lose by living my life the way I think that I deserve to live. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I know. I want to make sure you get in your Uber on time. Okay. A big round of applause again for Bea, whose film is beautiful. I'm going to come get cozy next to you here because I feel far away. So I want to ask you a little bit more, Jameka, and thanks y'all for the little give and take there. You know, I want to know how you navigated telling a story that was rooted in Iceland while connecting it to sort of the global climate reality, and also to the fact that like you're making a film that is premiering at Sundance in a country where we have effectively like retreated from our climate policies in so many ways. Like, talk a little bit about sort of that connective tissue where you worried this film like wouldn't even have an audience at this moment in the U.S.
No, I knew the film would always have an audience. I think that my experience humbled me deeply, and I realized that you know, none of us are exempt from this world. None of us are exempt from climate challenges and all of these things that will happen, not may happen. They are going to happen. It's just a matter of when it will impact you. And so that was what my experience taught me. And so I think at that point, that was my passion. That was the thing that lit the fire under me to make sure that the story went out into the world. And so I hope that when people look at it, they understand that while we are talking about Iceland and the loss of glaciers and the loss of land, there is something deeper there. And this is not just an Icelandic story. This is a story for everyone. And your experience will be reflected when you watch the film. I promise that.
Yeah. I mean, I felt that way even, coming here. Like there's more ice and snow on the ground in Austin, Texas, where I live right now than there is here. And that was quite a surprise when my plane landed. To me, climate storytelling often centers sort of a masculinity coded expertise. Your film has a woman director and obviously you in the producer's chair. I'm really curious, like, what you think a woman's lens allows you to foreground in a film like this that has a male protagonist.
Well, I don't want to generalize too much, but I think men are inherently not as in touch with their emotions as women.
You don't
Um,
want to generalize on that?
I'm trying to keep it PC. But I think that you know, for men, they'll just be like, "Oh, we lost a glacier," or "This is happening," and it's very factual. Whereas women can expand upon that and say like what those feelings actually mean. And so this story needed that. It needed, it's not just a really dry climate film. It's not just a story that's like glaciers are melting, we're going to lose everything, save the animals. That's not the film that we wanted to tell, and it's not the story that's there. There is a really deep connection to the emotional loss, what grief actually is, and how can you grieve something that isn't really yours, it belongs to everyone, but has such an important part of your life. And so those are the themes that we explore.
I love that. I want us to talk a little bit about the industry, and I might ask you to like throw a few elbows around here. So, as I know you're good at that. As a producer, your work is often sort of less visible, but obviously no less essential in getting a film made. I'm curious how gender and race shape who gets credit, authority, trust in documentary filmmaking, particularly, and especially if you can speak more narrowly even about climate stories. I'd be curious.
Sure. I think with climate stories, for some reason, we view science through a very white male gaze. And this planet as for everyone. There's more of people who are not white and male on this planet than there are. And so it's like, why are they the authority? We asked a lot of these questions while we were telling the story. And I think as that relates to filmmaking, you know, in America especially, this country was, you know, colonialized, and we look at a lot of things through a very particular gaze. And inherently, as a person of color, I always question that and I always challenge that. And being in a room full of people who are actually willing to listen. Because a lot of times I'm in these rooms and they bring me in for a very specific point of view. It's like we have a Black or an African American character. We need to know how this character should be framed. Is this the correct viewpoint? Okay, now we're done. You can go and like hang out over there. And so the collaboration on this project with Sarah Dosa, Shane Boris, Elijah Stevens, Aaron Casper, who's here, our editor, Jocelyn Chapu, like these conversations were actually very cathartic to all of us. And I think it was the first time I've really been in a room and been the other on the storytelling side, but had a lot of ability to tell the story because of my own personal experiences.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, when you think about like when Bea was here talking about sort of land theft in Kenya, that's like historical but ongoing. Glacier loss feels like future facing, but also sort of frighteningly irreversible. What do you think like, justice looks like in storytelling where repair might not be possible? Like, and how do you sort of resist despair? I mean, so many of the climate films I've watched at Sundance and the screeners that I've seen have been like, I mean, it's really dark. They almost all feel like horror films. I'm not going to lie. And so how do you sort of how do you find either hope or justice in these types of stories?
I think for a long time, a lot of people who might be in this room have been immune to climate change. And I say that from the perspective of landfills are built in African American communities. Pollution plants, data centers, they're going up in places that are, either historically African American or might be more indigenous in population. Because quote unquote, the land is cheap. So these are things that people of color have contended with in this country for a very long time. So climate stories are not new to us, but I think climate stories are reaching a new audience. And, we have a lot of people in Europe who this film impacts who are now wrestling with, oh, climate change is impacting us. We need to look at this a little bit differently. And so I think, again, the story of America has somewhat been, it's not my problem until it is. And I think we're all now realizing, whether it be climate change or things happening on the ground with ice in Minneapolis, these are everyone's stories and they will impact you, just a matter of when.
Absolutely. As a journalist, I'm always curious, like, how documentary filmmakers define themselves. Like, do you define yourself first as a filmmaker or as a journalist or an editorialist or like an activist? I mean, where do you fall on that spectrum? And I guess, is there a differentiation for you?
Um, I think if you're telling documentary stories, no offense to Miss Taylor Swift, but if you're telling Taylor Swift stories, that's one thing. But if you're actually telling social justice documentaries, I think you definitely consider yourself an activist first, a storyteller second, and then maybe a producer third or a filmmaker third. At least that's how I look at it through my lens.
And your lens, by the way, isn't just climate film. I mean, talk a little bit about your sort of previous work in the
Oh,
social
yeah.
justice and civil rights space.
Yeah, this is, again, my first environmental film. I've worked in a lot of I call them the invisible stories, the stories that impact people of color that maybe people don't know about. One of my most recent but really impactful films was a film called Through the Night. It came out during COVID, which was actually serendipitous, maybe, but it talks about the need for the 24-hour daycare system in America, because if you are economically challenged or if you're a single mom and you're working around the clock, who's taking care of your kids? And so there are these 24-hour daycares, and people are like, wait, what? I have no idea that this existed. And I'm like, yeah, how do you think single moms are able to like work and support their kids? And I like to, the point of my storytelling background is to shed a light on things that people may think they know about, but really don't know about.
When you're making a film, I'm curious who you think about being most accountable to. I mean, like at the 19th, we talk a lot about like, we're not telling stories for journalists, we're telling stories for the audience, for the women and queer people we serve. When you are producing a film, when you're not a director, you're a producer, how do you think about who you're accountable to?
It's funny because I think it depends on each project. But mostly I really look at myself and I say, can I connect with the story? Is there something powerful about this that I can understand or reflect back on in my personal experience? And that's usually my gauge and my guide.
Yeah. And then going back to a couple of questions that I asked Bea and I wanted to hear from you on before our time runs out. Tell me a little bit. I mean, when you're thinking about when people see this film, when young women, when women of color see this film, when they see your role in this film, like what do you want to feel possible to them? What lessons do you want them to take?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think for me, I just want women of color to make more films. So I don't care if it's about climate change. I don't care if it's about, what's happening in your own backyard. I just want more diverse storytelling. I think it's really important. So yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, we've been really honored to get to be here with you and with Bea. I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you for making the stories you're making. Thank you for injecting your identity into this space. And everyone, please go see these films. They are both fantastic. Your premiere is Tuesday. Is that
Tuesday at
Tuesday tomorrow?
11:30.
Tuesday is tomorrow, everyone.
Yes.
Yes. At
At the
11:30.
library.
Yes. Awesome. So
Please
please
get
consider.
there.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.